For 2 years, Norma Meikle has been attending the Mater Hospital's Breast Cancer Centre. She doesn't have the condition, but her mother suffered with it and her sister died from it. Norma is taking part in a 5-year worldwide trial to see if the drug tamoxifen can prevent the development of breast cancer occurring in women with a family history of the disease.
I have a daughter and, I'd like to think that anything they learn from the program will be of benefit to her and every other woman.
However, the study is taking a new direction. Researchers are focusing on how breast cancer develops in women who have a family history of the condition. Scientists want to discover the breast cancer gene known as BRCA1.
At present, we can look for footprints that are nearby the gene in families to tell us whether it's probably present. We can't type for the actual gene.
Professor Forbes says finding the gene won't be enough. His team will examine the genetic makeup of the women on the trial to see if tamoxifen can actually switch off the breast cancer-causing gene.
And so we're going to have the largest pool of high-risk women studied in this way that's ever been done, and it's really going to provide new data for the world.
We are preparing a final report for the Commonwealth Government. We'll be putting forward ideas for better family policies in this country.
This site overlooking Newcastle Beach has remained vacant for 23 years. However, work is about to begin on a multi-million-dollar residential site. The project will comprise 40 apartments with parking and a pool. It should be completed this time next year. The idea of building residential accommodation in the city is in line with the Building Better Cities program. A strategy has been devised to encourage inner-city living.
Its core aim is really to get people back into inner Newcastle and help revitalise the inner city.
Under the program, suitable shops, warehouses or other commercial properties will be bought and converted into housing.
We're asking for a fair market price. So that's the aim of this invitation, and I think we should be able to achieve that because we're getting a very good response.
Interested companies, developers and individuals with property in the inner city can obtain guidelines about which sites are eligible. The Department of Planning has an information kit. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Dr Julian Parmigiani, consultant psychiatrist in the District Court today, said a camera in the cell of Robert Jerd may have prevented his death. It's alleged Jerd used his socks to hang himself from the bars of his cell. Dr Parmigiani said isolation was a crucial element. He told the court that while Jerd had police as targets to hurl abuse at, he was occupied, but when he was left in his cell, that's when he started to look at himself. He said alcohol consumption and antisocial behaviour would have put Jerd at a high risk of suicide. According to the psychiatrist, it would have been more appropriate to have greater supervision of the prisoner than had occurred. Renovations to the Tari police station are now taking place to include a closed-circuit television. Dr Parmigiani said it's a matter of identifying cases where things can go wrong. A neighbouring prisoner has claimed Mr Jerd has said he was going to neck himself. The consultant psychiatrist told the coroner that if someone says they're going to kill themselves, you've got to listen. Some 25 witnesses have been called to give evidence at the inquiry. Over the next few days, Coroner Guild will hear the testimony of police officers on duty at the time of the alleged incident. Tracy Walsh, NBN News.
The federal government has announced a $150 million package of measures to help regional Australia. One aim is to establish local organisations which will develop a blueprint for each area's future development. Chairman of the Hunt Economic Development Corporation, Barry Goldstiver, told Newcastle Business Club that the Hunter is halfway there.
We've already identified where we want to go, how we want to get there, and generated in that process a high degree of cohesion within our community.
Mr Goldstiver believes there are 3 areas where the Hunter could grow.
We are a natural location for big industry. We have the energy, we have the road and rail infrastructure, and we have the port to support that kind of development.
The second growth area identified by the Hunt Economic Development Corporation is tourism.
With the expressway now linking us to Sydney, we have a huge opportunity to grow repeat business out of Sydney.
Mr Goldstiver says the Hunter should be poised to capitalise on the growth of Sydney.
Some businesses can better locate here in the Hunter, even though there might be a transport component to get their goods into the Sydney market.
The school bus was on a regular run from Gloucester Primary School to small farming communities along the narrow back road to Coolangalook. When it met a heavy gravel truck on this narrow curve, there was simply not enough room for both vehicles and the bus was sideswiped. The impact hurled the 19 children around the interior of the bus, showering them with broken glass. As word of the crash went out, emergency services feared the outcome. It was a relief that the most serious injury was a broken leg. That child was flown by the Westpac chopper to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital. Concerned parents drove to the scene, comforting children at the roadside as the mountain chill and dark descended. Both drivers escaped injury, the bus driver angry there was nothing he could do to get further off the road. Local farmer Peter Barr, who phoned for help, said the road is too narrow for heavy vehicles.
The whole road itself, it's atrocious.
Police are now carrying out a detailed investigation into the accident. Jim Sullivan, NBN News. That's for sure. You going to do the footage up there?
24 hours a day, trucks roll through New South Wales delivering goods and materials, but not all those heavy vehicles should be on the road. In a joint operation between police and the RTA, trucks and buses are being inspected and tested for their roadworthiness. The biggest checkpoint is on the Pacific Highway at Karua, but other inspection stations have been set up on the New England Highway at Willow Tree and at Coonabarabran on the Newell Highway. It's a three-pronged attack, which has so far seen around 5,000 vehicles inspected. At least 55 of those have been either uninsured or unregistered.
And certainly this is of concern to us, that so many are out there on the roads without paying their registration and insurance fees.
And then there's the unlicensed drivers. Around 14 have been caught so far.
Well, it's certainly of concern if the people are driving a class of vehicle that they've never been examined upon. One has to wonder whether they are in fact competent to drive that vehicle.
At Karua and near Murrurundi, police alone have handed out 561 infringement notices. Since word of the operation spread, police say they have detected rushed repair work, including new tyres on many vehicles. What makes this operation so successful is that it's continuing around the clock, making it difficult for drivers to avoid the inspection. Operation Joint Effort will end next week.
It's a 45-kilometre trip from Dungog to Patterson, on board 76 students in a 53-seat bus.
You've got 19 kids down and you hit them brakes when you see these log trucks and that coming through. You hit your brakes, all them kids could fall over.
Jim Miller has been trying to get an extra contract to run another bus on the route, but the Department of Transport has knocked him back. Concerned parents have written a dozen letters to the department over the last year. The department giving the same reply: the bus hasn't reached capacity. Working under the Passenger Transport Act, if there are any children on board around the age of 12 or younger, 1/3 of these passengers don't count. A spokesman from the Department of Transport said school bus travel was the safest road transport in the state. But parents on this route are calling for the politicians to do something before someone gets hurt.
They've been concerned about the fact that their children have to travel 90 kilometres round trip on roads which are not the best in places, contesting with other traffic which is travelling at speed. They fear greatly for the safety of their children, and justifiably so.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Officials at the Newcastle Sports Centre will be kept busy for the next 2 days. Hundreds of students from Taree to Swansea are competing in the regional track and field championships. While athletes warmed up for the preliminary events, spectators rugged up against the cool blustery winds that were sweeping the grandstands. The runners, though, were oblivious to the cold, a couple of laps of the track enough to get the blood pumping. The crowd cheered companions on, enjoying the antics of a dog that just wanted to join in the fun. Athletes have already proved themselves at their school and zone championships. A win over the next 2 days will ensure a place at the state championships in September.
The Curry smelter is just one of the more than 20 assets Alcan owns Australia-wide, which combined employ more than 2,400 people. The company is only behind Comalco and Alcoa as the country's biggest aluminium producer. But its parent company, Alcan Aluminium Limited, decided in January to sell its 73% share of Alcan Australia to concentrate on North American and European markets. Yesterday, the 130 million shares were snapped up at $2.55 each, a $334 million vote of confidence in Alcan's future by the Australian corporate sector. This is partly due to an enormous overhaul of the company in the last few years. Curry in the Hunter Valley was one of the hardest hit, with its 950 employees slashed to 700, and aluminium production also cut by 10%. But the restructuring and increased world prices have taken Alcan from a $3 million loss in the same quarter of last year to a $9 million profit this year.
I think the improved results of Alcan Australia and Curry are a sign that those changes were for the better and put us in a good position, I think, for the future.
The most noticeable change forced by the takeover will be its name, with the Australian company forced to drop Alcan by the end of next year. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Mayor Marie Callaghan used her casting vote to defeat the motion. If passed, it would have meant 2 sheds and 45,000 chickens near Kitchener. Originally, council had only received 1 complaint about the proposal, but yesterday a group of residents marched on the council chambers to complain. The defeat for the developers opens the doors for an appeal to the Land and Environment Court, which takes the matter out of council's hands. But council did give the go-ahead for a controversial 125-seat twin cinema on Wallumbye Road at Bellbird. A few weeks ago, Mayor Marie Callaghan called the proposal a second-rate alternative to another entertainment centre proposed for the town in the CBD. But that 350-seat alternative is still a possibility, which could see the Wallumbye Road developers hold off until it's certain it has a monopoly on the town. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
John Money is going to miss the lifestyle on the Central Coast. One thing, the summer's days on the beach.
If the waves are okay, I can still get in a tube, yeah.
But the challenge of taking Auckland into the Winfield Cup and a $250,000 a year salary was too good to refuse. With wife Julie, he flies out tomorrow after spending a year chasing up players for the new team.
And I've been spending about 2 million or 1.6 Australian, 2 million New Zealand of the salary cap, and I've been recruiting players.
While Moni could not confirm it, it's expected Greg Alexander and Phil Blake will go to Auckland next year. The 47-year-old coach became a world figure in the game, coaching Wigan for 4 years, winning every premiership. Prior to that, he spent 9 years at Parramatta, 6 years as head coach. Well known for his easygoing approach, Moni will spend seasons 95 and 96 in New Zealand and then maybe go back to England. He is even keen to coach the Knights if the job comes up. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
At Wednesday's council meeting, Deputy Mayor Mick Tuck objected to funding the roadworks on Cowans Lane. He told councillors that it's a low priority and many other roads are in much greater need of improvement. But the construction has been approved at a cost of $110,000. Oxley Island resident Bruce Cowan has agreed to give a piece of waterfront property to council for the purpose of a car park. Other locals have raised $18,000 to offset costs.
We were actually prepared to help ourselves, and I think that's a very important thing. The council only has a certain amount of money to spend. We had a vision, and I think that the majority of the councillors last night also had a vision that they could see the future here for tourism.
In reply to accusations of queue jumping on the works priority list, Councillor Les Brown says urgent road widening and construction of footpaths throughout the council area have not been forgotten.
No major project has been put in jeopardy. The works program generally is totally endorsed as it's been recommended to us by staff.
Buses make regular day trips to the spot. Work is due to begin by the end of the year. Tracy Walsh, NBN News.
Last week's loss is one performance the Falcons are keen to forget. At training, the boys were sharpening their shooting for tonight's clash with the Brisbane Bullets. Newcastle will be looking at a few tactics used during their first encounter with Brisbane, which resulted in a 19-point victory for the Falcons.
We played 48 minutes of zone the last time we played them. We expect them to be prepared for that this time, so maybe we'll mix up a little bit.
Coach Wiseman has had to make a last-minute change to his lineup, with centre Paul Simpson ruled unfit due to a back injury. Stepping in for Simpson in his NBL debut will be guard Michael Grant. The Falcons haven't beaten Brisbane twice in the same season for more than 10 years, but a win tonight is important for another reason.
It's a real dogfight for, I think, a half a game separates 8, 9 and 10. So instead of focusing on that fight, we just need to win ball games. We need to look at the teams ahead of us.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
It was during a muster on Wednesday that prison officers at Maitland Correctional Centre noticed 2 inmates missing. During a search, they found the pair hiding in the jail's saddlery shop. Peter Kilduff and Michael Stanford had been in the room for around an hour and a half. By using available tools, they'd tried to escape in 4 different places, including through a wall, an air conditioning duct and a skylight.
They wouldn't have been able to get out of that room to the exterior part of the jail. It's a very secure workshop. In fact, it's probably one of the most secure areas of that particular prison.
Police investigating the attempted breakout were at the jail today. 26-year-old Stanford is serving time for armed robbery, while it's 21-year-old Kilduff's second escape attempt since being recaptured in dramatic circumstances in May. 2 days after fleeing Southport Watch House in Queensland, he and 3 others were chased through bushland at Charlestown. He was charged with numerous offences, including the armed robberies of the Windale Post Office and the Broadmeadow News Agency. During his transport to Newcastle Courthouse on June 6th, Kilduff again tried to escape, this time by breaking out of a prison van.
At this time, until all the police investigations are finished, he's being held in another section of the prison, but there certainly isn't any fear of the security where he is.
While police investigations are still continuing, both inmates are expected to be charged with the attempted escape. They'll appear in Maitland Court next week. The exact date will not be made public because of security concerns.
Injuries of one type or another cause around 6% of deaths every year. The Injury Outcomes Council is working in the Barwon district to identify the extent and characteristics of injuries in the local area, so the incidents may be reduced. The latest local figures between November 1990 and October 1991 show the highest percentage of injuries happen in the home, followed by farm injuries and transport-related accidents. Sports injuries also account for a high percentage of recorded accidents. Guest speaker at today's conference, Pam Albany, says through public awareness, problems such as road tolls can be reduced.
From a historical perspective, the carnage on Australian roads has decreased enormously. Less so in country regions, simply because people don't have access to public transport.
Miss Albany says there will always be people who live high-risk lives who will insist on speeding or refusing to wear bike helmets. However, she says 10 years ago, many people would not have thought public opinion on smoking would change as dramatically as it has.
The fact is now that it's pretty well antisocial to smoke. It's going to be antisocial to get on your motorbike without a helmet before very long too.
Mr McCowan and Dr Rod Omond were back at work this afternoon after spending 5 weeks in war-ravaged Rwanda. The pair went to Rwanda to try to re-establish Compassion's Christian Children's Development Program, which was decimated by the war. They also helped the relief effort.
Our aim was to support a number of camps where we supported about 8,000 people, and we also supported 3 orphanages where 1,200 children were living, supplying with food, organising their water at times.
While in Rwanda, they discovered that there were about 20,000 unaccompanied children in need of shelter, food and medical care. More than 1 million people have fled Rwanda after what Mr McCowan says was a politically motivated genocide.
It's government against the people rather than tribal. The former government eliminated its opposition, and there were 4 or 5 opposition parties, including members of the Hutu tribe.
As cholera sweeps through the refugee camps outside Goma, Dr Oman says the best thing for them would be to return home.
The only way really that those people can be helped and that disease stopped is to move the people back out of the camp and back into Rwanda, where there are good supplies of water and there are even crops standing in the fields that they could use.
The pair has urged Australians to give generously to aid agencies working to help these people. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
You want to try one where you're looking, yes, watching where it... No, it's... That's the only witness. I'll prove it.
The semi-trailer was travelling south on the New England Highway last night. 8 kilometres from Glen Innes, the heavy vehicle careered off the road and crashed into Stonehenge Creek. The truck lost its load of building supplies and ruptured its diesel tank. Fire officers placed booms around the area to restrict the spillage. The Environmental Protection Authority was also called to assess the damage, which was kept to a minimum. A crane removed the wreckage. The driver escaped with only minor injuries. Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
It was practice as usual for the 3 members of the Aussie team. A special track has been built at Cessnock Showground in the Hunter Valley for an enduro shootout on Saturday night. Logs, dirt, bumps, rocks, just like the real thing in the bush.
We've tried to get it as close as possible. It's a little bit different because you don't have trees hitting you in the face like branches.
100 bike riders are competing, 4 in a race, the top 3 going through till there are 4 left in the final. Cessnock riders Tony Vickers, Peter Carney and David Cocky make up 3 of the 6-man Aussie team for the World Enduro titles to be held in the States in September.
It involves a lot of preparation, fitness, and when we get over there sorting our bikes and all that out, and 6 days of actually torture.
They'll race 300 kilometres a day through open country. Money raised from Saturday night's race will help pay for the team's trip. Peter Ryan, NBN News.